Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Gilda Evans, bringing you the Autism Resource Podcast. This podcast and the ARP website are your one-stop knowledge and resource base for autism and much more. I'm happy to have Drew Deraney join me as my guest today. Drew is a coach, author, and advocate dedicated to empowering caregivers and families of individuals with autism. As the Caregiver and Family Health Coach, he helps parents and caregivers find balance, build resilience, and care for themselves as compassionately as they care for their loved ones. Drew is the proud father of 3 children, including a son with autism, which inspires his mission to provide guidance, education, and community support. Through coaching, speaking, and his podcast, From Caving In to Crushing It, Drew encourages others to live authentically, rise with strength, and lead with purpose. Welcome, Drew, and thanks so much for taking the time to join me and discuss the work that you do.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, Gilda.
So, to get started, would you please share a bit about your personal story as the father of a son with autism and how that experience has shaped your mission?
Absolutely. It's interesting because he's our oldest of 3. And when my wife was pregnant with him, it was a relatively normal pregnancy until it wasn't. It was interesting because she ended up being allergic to the pregnancy, which is like 0.001% of people that happens to. And then she ended up in the late term to be pre-gestational diabetes. And so on bed rest the last month or so. But that was our first one, so we didn't realize anything. And there were no red flags from the doctors. And then when he was born, he acted fine and he spoke at a normal time. He's highly cognitive, but it was one of those things where he started doing stuff like running from corner to corner in the room, or he never crawled. He scooched on his butt. He liked to rub his earlobe and other people's earlobes, but things like that. But we didn't know any different. But otherwise, until he went into preschool, he was like a normal kid. So we didn't think anything of it. In preschool, he started getting in trouble a lot. And that's where it was interesting because at that point, my wife wanted to get him tested because she's a nurse and noticed some things. And first time dad, I'm like, no, he's fine. He's just a boy being a boy. So we did butt heads over that, and we're divorced now. So I'm sure that's part of it because if you look at the families with special needs, there's higher divorce rate with that. So it definitely contributed. Not saying it was everything, but it definitely contributed. Finally, we ended up getting him tested. He was probably in 7th grade, so 13 years old, and he was diagnosed with autism. And then we're like, well, okay, now what? My wife at the time and we didn't think of him any differently just because of the label, the diagnosis. I just felt, okay, we got to learn what that means. But if he wants to drive, I'm going to let him drive. If he wants to play sports, he's going to play sports. If he wants to do something else, he's going to do something else. Basically, we didn't want to put limits on him. And so we started learning about IEPs and 504 plans and all this kind of stuff. So we did end up with a 504 plan and IEP in middle school for him. I had to fight for it. That's another story, trying to get the schools to understand. And then an IEP in high school. But I don't really think we treated him any differently. His siblings would probably say otherwise. And that's another thing because siblings are really affected in families. Because if they feel that they're not going to get the attention, they don't want to bother mom and dad because they're focusing on the child with special needs, that could be another issue. But yeah, thinking back, we didn't do anything differently for him than we did for the others. If he wanted to work doing something, we'd let him do it. So no limits, no restrictions. It wasn't honestly until he was older that it got more challenging.
All right, so speaking of challenge, you've led me into the next question. What do you feel are some of the biggest challenges that caregivers face when raising a child with autism or other neurodivergence, and how can they start to overcome them? Every case is different.
Yeah.
Everyone with autism is different. Everyone with a neurodivergence is different. So when you're facing these challenges, what do you do?
I think for us, when you get a diagnosis, then you're like, now what? It's a surprise. And I think in our society, things like that should not be a surprise. And what I mean by that is I'm a proponent now of early education for first-time parents. We are always taught the linear path. Everything's going to be fine, and this is what you will do. And it's not that you want to scare first-time parents or young parents, but at least give them what the possibility might be. Everything does look well, but in the event that it doesn't, here are some options you have if. And that would be who to call if. Because when you get that moment of, oh my God, now what? And you don't know where to start, where to go, that's a helpless feeling. We at least started noticing things and started asking more questions after he was diagnosed because we were both in the healthcare field. So we knew how to navigate it. I think one of the biggest challenges is those parents who are not familiar with the healthcare landscape and don't have a friend who works with them as whatever role they have. So I think that's a big challenge. And the key is to find mentors early, just somebody who you can trust. And a lot of times we're taught to keep our dirty laundry in the house, right? In the four walls. Generations are different. I don't believe in that. I believe in letting people know what's going on because how do you get help if you don't tell people what's going on? Obviously, you want to tell the right people who might be familiar with the situation or may be able to guide you, but keeping things to yourself only just adds to the stress.
And the feeling of isolation.
Isolation, lack of connection,
Yeah.
stress, and then what ends up happening is when the parents lose steam, who's going to take care of that child with special needs?
Yeah. And we were talking about that what now moment. That's what we're all about at ARP. That's what not only this podcast, but the nonprofit organization, the Autism Resource Project, that's what we're all about, is creating that one-stop shop, but one-stop place that a parent with that what now feeling can go and find a roadmap, build a game plan, access the 4 pillars that we're developing right now, the podcast, of course, the library, the community network, the marketplace, and we're going to be incorporating AI as well, a very user-friendly AI that is going to be able to interact with them and help them to a large extent create this game plan. So I resonate very strongly with that comment of yours that, oh my God, what now? Because all of us who have children who have been diagnosed either with autism or some other neurodivergence, we've all been there. We've all had that what now experience. And wow, if I had what my board members and I are creating right now, I would have thought I found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
I'll tell you, there's nothing like the true one-stop shop that you're building. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and thank you for what you do. You often talk about the 6 pillars of family health. Can you explain what you mean by that? Can you explain what they are and why they matter so much for caregivers and for families?
Absolutely. And actually, I recently added a 7th pillar to match the number of letters in the word pillar because pillar is an acronym. So the 7 pillars of family health, I look at the whole person when I coach and I want to find out where their priorities are. The P in pillars stands for physical health. And the I in pillars is for intellectual or cognitive health. The stands for love or emotional health. The second L is legacy or financial health. The A is awareness or mental health. The R was the 7th one I added. That's resilience. Or do you have a desire in life? And then S is spiritual or energetic health. So I coach on the cognitive, emotional, mental, and the resilience piece. And if I'm not the right coach, I'll refer people out for the physical health, the financial health, or the spiritual or energetic. But the key here is I will assess on a scale from 1 to 10 where people feel they are on those health pillars. And more often than not, most are not higher than 6 or 7 on any of them.
On a scale of 10?
On a scale of 10.
Yeah.
And some, if they are high on one, for some people, it's the financial, that they may be high on the financial, but everything else is lacking. So I will help them on what's lacking. The idea is to get people as close to a 10, which is the best they can be on all 7 pillars. But the key piece there is that resilience and the desire piece. Because if they're already burned out, we got to help them with that piece first before we get to the other stuff.
Yeah.
It's the whole person we got to look at.
What are some of the most common misconceptions? Because I'm sure you run into this all the time, right?
Yeah.
Some of the most common misconceptions about autism and caregiving that you would like to share. Tell me without naming names.
Yeah.
Tell me some stories.
I certainly know that, especially with my son, he has so many emotions. And one of the misconceptions is that people with autism don't have emotions, that they have more, I think, more emotions than we neurotypical people do. My son is one of the most sensitive and thoughtful people I know. And he's got so many emotions, he just doesn't want to know what to do with them because he's highly cognitive and he's emotional. His emotional regulation and his social skills are what are lacking. So a misconception is that there's no emotions. Another misconception is that they either do or don't like hugs. Some don't. When you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism. Everybody's unique, everybody's different. Matthew loves hugs from his family, people he knows, but there are some people where if you try to hug them, that's the worst thing you can do. Other misconceptions for caregivers, a misconception is I have to do this alone, that I'm all by myself with this and no one else will understand. So I have to do this myself. And that can't be further than the truth. There's just so many different misconceptions but those are two that I can think of right off the top of my head.
All right. I think a good way to finish up. Number one, I want to ask you if there's anything else you'd like to add we haven't covered, the most important takeaway you feel the listeners should have from our conversation, but also if you could sort of end this conversation with a message of hope and encouragement that you can give to caregivers who are listening who may feel overwhelmed, isolated, or uncertain about the future.
Absolutely. If you allow people in, it's going to get better. I always mention to caregivers that the first thing we do is we want self-awareness. We want to realize if you are living the life you want to live. Now, we never ask to be in the position we're in, yet there's some gratitude that we need to feel because the caregivers are very selfless, very selfless. And you know what? Some of us think that if we take care of ourselves first, it's selfish, and it's not. It's sustainability. You need to sustain yourself. So if you're not at your best, then your loved one's not going to be at your best. And that's the first and foremost, the most important message. So you need to do a lot of self-awareness. Give yourself time to be alone and don't feel guilty about it. You don't have to be going 90 miles an hour 24/7, right? You have to take care of yourself. I always say that you should have a respite team. You should have a neighbor who you can call if you need 5 minutes, or a family member. And the government does have a lot of benefits that you just need to ask the right person. But you're definitely not in it alone. And I always say choose to write your own story instead of letting others write it for you. If you don't ask for help, someone's going to write your story for you and it's not going to be accurate.
I think those are very wise words. By the way, something you said sparked this question in my head, and I'm sure other people are wondering as well. How would people pay for a service such as yours? A lot of people who are parents of a neurodivergent child or have a neurodivergent loved one that they're caring for don't have a lot of money to spare.
Yeah.
And so how do you work that? Is it private pay? Do you work with self-direction or self-determination programs? Are there scholarships available? How does that work?
Well, I'm in the process of doing a few things. So for the people who are able to pay, it's one-on-one private. And I also do group coaching for organizations to help caregivers. But also I'm working on being paid by the state. So when I become a vendor of the state, then I can do it that way. And then there's also, I'm going to be taking a neurodiversity training course so I can be trained in neurodiversity. I'm hoping that if I can be a vendor of the state, and there's also ways of I can get paid by insurance companies if people have mental health in their insurance companies. So I'm doing whatever I can do to be able to not have my clients have to pay me directly where I get paid by third parties. But for right now, it is self-pay, but I keep it at a reasonable cost. I'm starting a Caregivers in Conversation community where I'm only going to be charging $97 a month. So it's doable if I have caregivers together supporting each other.
All right, that's fantastic. It's just so important that you're making this available for people at all income levels, regardless, and really doing your best to make it accessible for everyone who needs it. Because that feeling of support and encouragement and not being alone is crucial, really crucial.
I would do everything for free if I could. That would ultimately be my goal. But yeah, I'm trying to limit people feeling isolated and not connected. So if you go to my website at profitcompassion.com, it's PROFIT compassion, COMPASSION. And I named the company Profit Compassion because we always profit from being compassionate and we always profit from others being compassionate to us. So that's our mission. And so profitcompassion.com. I did put something on there where you can download for free. It's called the 5-minute reset. I know there are times where you come home from work and you may have had a great day at work and you're so productive and you get in your driveway, you pull up and you start getting nervous because you're afraid when you reach for that doorknob, it's your invisible second job you're coming home to. So when you can, I set up something. It's a 5-minute download of me walking you through stretching and breathing exercises, really just to ground yourself so you can be at your best when you open that door for your loved one. And I'm also putting together a caregiver burnout prevention checklist. That's also going to be a download on my website soon. So if you go to my website, check it out. You'll find a lot of different things. I write a blog once a week. You'll find it's for caregivers. And I also wrote a book back in 2023 called I'll Have What She's Having, Memoir of a Reformed People Pleaser. I did a deep dive after I had 4 faith-shaking moments about 7 to 10 years ago in my life, and I did a deep dive in personal development, and I realized many of my decisions were based on being a people pleaser. I did everything for other people. I lived my life the way I thought other people wanted to, and I've seen a strong correlation between caregivers and people pleasers. Many caregivers are people pleasers. We give, haven't learned how to receive, and you can't give from an empty bucket. And I've burned out a couple times, and I always like to say I'm only 2 steps ahead of my clients. I've made mistakes and I'll show you what they are so you can avoid them. And then the last thing, you can always go on YouTube to Profit Compassion, my podcast, From Caving In to Crushing It. I invite people on who have faced adversity and see adversity as an opportunity to take massive action and change something in themselves and become a stronger person on the other side. So it's inspirational, it's motivational, and I want to give you all hope. So everything I do is to let you know that you're not alone, that you can just reach out, even just to talk. You can find my information on my website, but I don't want anybody to be alone because I know what it's like to think you're alone and we end up causing ourselves to be alone. And that's very unhealthy. And I don't want that to happen to any of you.
All I can say is, wow, we've all been there. I think we can all relate to a certain extent to what you just said, Drew. And thank you for what you do. Thank you for your compassion. Thank you for the work and the support that you give to this community. It's so important for caregivers to remember to take care of themselves as well. And you're absolutely right. We often forget about that, and we shouldn't. We mustn't, because we need to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of the people that we love.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. And thank you for your time and for sharing your story with us today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast. You can find it on Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify, and other popular platforms. We'd appreciate you taking the time to leave us a review. You can also listen to the podcast on YouTube at ARP Social, where you'll find bonus content, and be sure to follow us on Facebook or Instagram to get up-to-date notifications about the latest news and episodes. If you would like more information on anything else we've covered on the Autism Resource Podcast, visit us online at autismresourceproject.org/podcast. Be sure to check out our growing website often, since we are continually adding useful information and resources. I want to thank our listeners for spending part of their day with us. This is the Autism Resource Podcast, and I'm Gilda Evans, reminding you to take care of yourself and that special person in your life.